Hello guys and welcome to today's video. Today we will be continuing our series where Operation Unthinkable was going to be attempted. If you haven't watched the first video, please go back and watch it. Otherwise this map will basically be completely unsensical. It just won't make sense. So yeah, go watch it. No, not after this. What am I on about? So, if you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe. And without any further ado, let's jump straight in. So, to start, we're going to have a gander at the Soviet Union's GDP per capita. So, we're going to be looking in 1947, as that is around when I'd say that we ended the last episode with the end of World War II and the following consequences. So, to put this into perspective, in real life, the Soviet Union's economy in 1947, right, the GDP per capita, so like the average amount of money, was $3,837, right? However, right, in this scenario, their economy would be a whole bunch better than it was in real life, with the normal economy of $19,619 per person. Well, the GDP per capita. Right? Now, obviously, a lot of this would vary. This regions would be a lot poorer because they just were in a war. Finland would be probably one of their richest spots, and Alaska is actually their richest spot, probably due to the low population, though, because it's GDP per capita. But yeah. So, that will do it for my current rant about Soviet Union economics. Right, so the first event to be happening in this video will, of course, be the Greek Civil War. Now, technically this broke out beforehand, but this will be when we are covering it. So, a communist revolution, I literally had to find a map and point all of these down. It was very difficult. But yeah, a communist revolution will begin in the country of Greece. And the Albanians, Yugoslavians, and Bulgarians will help out the Soviets. Despite not being Soviet puppets, they are communist nations and would love to help out the rest of the communist. Right? So they will start an invasion into Greece, and some of these communist uprisings will link up, and the island of Crete will practically fall. Then the Italians will launch an invasion into eastern Greece, wanting that Mediterranean coast, and the land invasion will start to go better, with this whole peninsula starting to capitulating. Then the invasion by the communist forces will ramp up tremendously, and this island will also nearly fall, and the peninsula around Athens will be encircled. So Athens Peninsula will soon fall along with this island, and it is now just a race for this part of Greece between the ultranationalists and communists. So then we will have Greece surrendering over to the communists, and a peace treaty that looks something like this. So, Bulgaria will take this region of Thrace from the Greeks. Not Algerians. The Albanians will expand their borders further into Greece, and the Serbians will get a tiny little alteration in border, however it's not actually that much land. And the Italians will gain this part of Greece. Greece will become one of these communist states rather than a Soviet puppet, as the Soviets are completely broke and cannot manage another puppet. Basically, the most economically viable and good parts of their empire are the most likely to rebel currently, So they're trying to place as least economic strain as they physically can. And a lot of that money, by the way, is going to be going into rebuilding Eastern Europe, that is now utterly, completely destroyed, along with the rest of Europe. So, the next event we will be covering will be the Indonesian Civil War, in which a communist uprising, rather than a normal uprising, will fight the Indonesian government that is technically owned by the Dutch, although I didn't colour the Dutch in because that would just mean that the Dutch would become communist. And besides, they already declared independence in 1945, so they wouldn't want Dutch help. So, the US will come to the aid of Indonesia, and the communist uprising will start looking something like this. Then advances will be made on this island, and as the US troops arrive, the communists over here will start to capitulate. However, the Bornean communists will start to be doing better, and this island will nearly be on the brink of capitulating. So, Borneo and this island, I don't know the name of, will soon fall, and Jakarta will be cleansed of communists, except for this one island, but that doesn't really count. And yeah, then the Indonesian and American forces will start to move into Java to put down their rebellion. So the communist forces will start to get kicked out of the west of Indonesia. So after this war then stalemates, we will see a communist, non-communist split, with West Indonesia becoming democratic, so the Democratic Republic of West Indonesia, and the Democratic Federation of East Indonesia will be formed. So then China will annex Tibet, and this will make the Indians scared out of their crap. That's not supposed to happen yet. So then the Indians will, after hearing that the Pakistanis are buddying up with the Chinese for future protection, will strike the Pakistan government, claiming that they need expansion to protect themselves from the Chinese and the communist threat. The US will actually support their actions, as they are supporting the fascists in Europe as well, to try and help topple the communist regimes that are now running rampant across the world. So, the majority of the Kashmir region will fall to India, and some of East Pakistan. I don't know why I was also almost about to say East Bengal. So yeah, Bangladesh / East Pakistan will lose a whole bunch of that land as to stop them from just corridoring it off. East Pakistan will then fall, and some spearheads will start to form, with this spearhead, I think, capturing Islamabad. This region will also be held hostage by Indian forces, and will capitulate very quickly, with this spearhead starting to advance. However, despite their advances, the Pakistanis will start a invasion into South India. I almost called them Indonesia. And yeah, then this region of Pakistan will be encircled, and this part of the Pakistan military force will be pushed back by the Indians. Then this region will fall to the Indians, and soon they will surrender, forming this Raj. They will call this the Republic of the Raj, a democratic republic on which all religions are allowed to be practiced and like everything like that. It's basically just a Western country that needs expansion. Right? They will then send out pleas to former British Raj states asking if they would like to be reintegrated. The Nepalese, the Nepalese, the people in Nepal will say, yeah, sure, let's join India because they like India even to this day. And Myanmar will be like, screw it, why not? We're getting a bit corrupt anyway, and yeah. Why has it got two slides of the same thing? I don't know. What is the purpose of this slide? Why is half of Indonesia not half of Indonesia and a random new dot here? I don't know. But anyway, the Vietnam War will kick off. And Vietnam will start to push into Laos. Please note, I made this scenario myself, and I don't know what the hell I was doing here. I was making this at like 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, actually, it probably wouldn't have been 9 o'clock. This bit probably would have been midnight the night before last. So yeah. Um, yeah. The Vietnamese will start to push into Laos, and the Vietnamese will start to push into South Vietnam. So, Laos will start to capitulate over with their communist uprisings. However, the South Vietnamese will push the ordinary Vietnamese back a bit. Laos will then fall to pure communism, and the push into Thailand will start. India is now on the side of the US in this war, and the US is obviously allied with South Indonesia and Thailand. So, not South Indonesia. See, look, my brain is not braining. South Vietnam and Thailand, along with the Democratic Republic of Indonesia. So, then the Vietnamese, I think, will expand with a force capturing Bangkok. However, they will start to be pushed back towards the Laos borders, especially round the Bangkok area. For some reason, these guys will suddenly be in a different color, and the South Vietnamese will push back up to their original border. This will lead to a peace treaty that will look something like this, with North Vietnam gaining Laos, South Vietnam being free, Cambodia being free, and Thailand also being free as a Indian ally. The Indonesians will also be passed on to being protected by the Indians as opposed to the US. However, the US and India have such good relations that they don't really see this as an issue. And the next thing to happen will be the Irani Civil War. So, Iran will start to have their civil war with, well, it was the Iran emergency? Or the Iran crisis, I think they called it. And a communist uprising will begin. The Soviets will, in this timeline, start to push into Iran, and the communists will start to consolidate a whole bunch of power. The Indians will then start to push in here, along with the US. Obviously, the US will be working with the Indian troops. So yeah, don't see this color and just be like, oh my god, US isn't even doing anything. No, they are. Just helping the Indians on their front. Yeah. But in the north, it's all absolutely cooking for the communists. The communists will then secure large amounts of North, not Vietnam, North Iran, that's it, and the Indians will start to push further into Iran, technically being at war with the real Iran government, but also fighting off these communists. Then the north will be consolidated by the communists, and a peace treaty will be reached. Why does it keep doing that? But yeah, a peace treaty will be reached in which the USSR will annex the Caspian coast, the Caspian coast, one of their objectives to do during their Russian Empire days. And then the Indians will get to military occupy the south, and the US will get to military occupy this region of Iran, with the rest of it becoming a Soviet puppet state. So, then the Malaysian crisis, or the Malaysian emergency, I can't remember which one. It's either the Iran emergency and Malaysian crisis, or the Malaysian emergency and Iran crisis. Now I can't remember which way around it is. That will start. So, the Malaysians will start to absolutely cook over here in Borneo and Malaysia. Next, the the Indonesian Democratic Federation or something will start to push into Borneo, and these guys, relieved with how great the communists are doing in Borneo, will restart their communist revolutions. They will start to get put down, however, the island of Borneo will fall. See, now, the communists will connect up in Malaysia, and let me just talk to you for a second about how important this war would actually be. So, say the Chinese, with their big industrial output, ever wanted to sail something like this out to Europe. Please ignore how bad this is. They would have to go through the Straits of Malacca, and then through the Straits of... No, not the Straits, the Suez Canal. And that would be a very important thing to, get rid of, because if the democratic people got this, they would not be able to ship into southern Europe, particularly Greece and these lot, to help out the communists in Europe. But on the flip side, if the communists got it, they would have even easier access into Europe and the USSR, and would be able to cut off the Indonesians from the mainland Indian allies. So, then the communist uprising will restart down here, and it looks very much like the communists will win. The communists connect up, and victory is assured for communism. Now, this day will be seen as one of the worst losing points in the Cold War, because if they had grasped that, if they had got Malaysia locked down, if they managed to even just get a West Malaysia, East Malaysia split, they would have been able to stop the Chinese from investing into Europe and stuff like that, and just stop their great, big economy in general. So, the Malaysian country, the Malaysians will be integrated into the East Indonesian Federation, capturing all of Malaysia. Oh, and the US will sign a pact with the Australians, New Zealand people, Australia and New Zealand. They will sign a treaty with Australia and New Zealand. Can you speak properly, right? To get a defensive treaty in the Pacific. Next, we'll have the US and Canada uniting to try and stop the communists, which would honestly probably please Trump. So, the last thing that I have scripted, last war that I have currently scripted for today's video, would be the Italians attacking the Egyptians. The Egyptians will be invaded by the Italians, and this would trigger a communist uprising in the country. Why is there this? Why is there this? That was never a thing. I'm very sorry that that exists and is ruining the of this. So, the fascist Italians will push more into Egypt. You can really see that I'm struggling to be awake today. And the communists will connect up in the east of Egypt. Then the ultranationalists will push further this way, being aided by the US. Yes, the US is aiding the fascists, okay, but this is kind of like how the Soviets and these guys, the Soviets and the Allies, helped each other during World War II to take out the fascists, except this time it's the fascists and the Allies taking out the communists, who are now a very obvious threat to democracy as a whole. So Egypt will fall over to the Italians, and the peace treaty would end up looking something like this, with a east? Why did I just say an east? An East Egyptian country being set up, an East Egyptian communist country being set up. I don't know what I said. Just communist? Just country. I cannot brain today. Brain does not brain. But yeah, the Italians will then push their border to the edge of the Nile River, and that will do it for today. These war scenarios, I think, unless this video is really goddamn short, in which case I'll extend it. So, we will say that the year is now 1955. Some of this stuff has happened along a much speeded up timeline, because, yeah, that's just how it would work, with the communists being a lot more prominent. So, in this reality, right, we're going to talk about some... It's completely popped out of my head. Some economies, yes. So, the US GDP per capita would be, in 1955, in real life, $38,152. However, they lose all of Alaska, right? But in return, they do gain Canada, which basically balances it out with a little bit of a net drop, weirdly enough, and in their GDP per capita. However, they would also have to pay 5% war reparations for World War III to the Soviets, leading to their economy to only be 35, right, the GDP per capita, sorry, to only be $35,864, right? Now, the USSR, with these war reparations, and with their economy in 1955, and their, in Iran, and, yeah, and Alaska, and Finland, would lead to their economy in this YouTube series being $39,212. That means that the US is behind the Soviets in GDP per capita. Now, this might be a bit misleading because most of that extra would still be going into rebuilding Eastern Europe. However, the Soviets aren't as actually broke as they were in our timeline, and they have probably one of the cheapest manufacturing countries on their border that they can also trade with, that they have fairly good relations with. So their economy is booming, and Soviet living conditions would go a whole bunch up, and this would be seen as a massive victory for communism. All across Europe, people's not life expectancy, people's life conditions would increase dramatically all across Europe and the rest of the communist world. Their leader is now stronger than the democratic leader. That is without considering that they have the entire economic output of China as well as the Soviets and their puppets. So the Soviets are in a bigger economy overall. However, the US does have more allies. India is still not as strong as China, but strong enough to challenge them within the region. Now, they probably wouldn't win. They'd probably lose in a fight with China, but they're having, mild success. But not mild success. They would be difficult to beat. And the US would obviously be going up against the USSR. But in Europe, they also have the fascists to come help them. And they also have the Australians and New Zealanders. Please note that Papua New Guinea, I think, at this time was part of Australia. That's why I haven't mentioned them as, as, yeah, one of their allies. So, overall, the US would have more allies that are weaker versus less allies that are stronger. However, they do have these unaligned communist nations that will start to go towards the Soviets. Perhaps, right, so in this universe, we don't actually ever see the Yugoslavians and the Soviets falling out, with Tito actually staying a lot more loyal to Stalin, with Stalin actually having done a bloody amazing job. Right? So, in that scenario, the Serbs, not at all concerned really with Tito being watered down, would unite with the Bulgarians, like it was planned that they would do in real life before Tito and Stalin had an argument. Albania would then be added into this union, forming a true Yugoslav state, minus Greece. Greece will also join the Yugoslav state, with it being now true Yugoslavia, all the Slavs of the Balkans being united, except for these ones living under Italian occupation. But that will have to do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and goodbye.